So even before building it, just try to get something out there that actually tests the market and says, are people going to say, yes, I'm going to pay for it? And I think one of the best analogies, it was smart. Michael Seibel, was you want to find a problem you're solving that's so immediate. It's like if someone's head's on fire, if you give them a brick, they're going to try to put it out with the brick.
I'm Tom Ward, and over the last couple years, I've had the chance to sit down with some of the biggest celebrities and influencers in the world. What I've always found most fascinating is the stories of the businesses that they've built behind the scenes. On this show, you'll get an inside look of what it takes to build a successful business from some of the biggest celebrities, business people, and up-and-coming entrepreneurs in the world. This is The Tom Ward Show. Hey guys, welcome to the Tom Ward Show, where we talk to the biggest entrepreneurs in the world. And today I've got Patrick Chandler. He's CMO and co-founder of FightCamp, which is an incredible boxing app you use at home. I love it. I use it the last couple of days. We'll talk about that in a second, but don't just take my word for it. It has over 19,000 five-star ratings in the App Store. It's super successful financially. It has over $90 million in funding, and they've got some big names attached to it too. Floyd Mayweather, Georges St-Pierre, and Mike Tyson, among others. So welcome, man.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Dude, first of all, I've boxed for like 12, 13 years. And I meet with my trainer, shout out Christian Caminera, you're the best. I meet with him once a week, and we hit mitts and we do all these, he's teaching me all these combinations. Now what happens the next day when I'm in the gym by myself? I don't remember any of it. So I'm sitting there at the bag by myself for rounds and rounds and rounds, throwing the same exact combinations I threw the week before, and the week before that, and the week before that. And that's where you guys come in. So tell us a little bit about the app and how it works.
Yeah, one thing we noticed when we started to build out FightCamp is that in order to cater to a lot of the market, you have to do a one-size-fits-all, right? So like kind of what you run into when you're going by yourself is you have to do the same thing over and over again. You can't necessarily progress. So when we were starting to come up with the idea, first of all, this is like the third or fourth pivot. So we'll get into that. Like, okay. It didn't start as FightCamp. It started as a very different product. But with FightCamp, yeah, it's basically we wanted to figure out how do we get as many people exposed to learning boxing and doing it and following really great workouts where they can advance over time and really feel that progress. So that was basically the very first thought we had was, how do we start doing that? And way back in the day, we actually just built the technology to track punches. First thing we did, just a measurement tool. And so we started with that one, and we were basically...
Well, actually, sorry to interrupt, go back a second. So Khalil's the founder, right? And he had the same problem as me. I think that's what led him to founding. He's boxing for a year, not progressing anymore. There's got to be something out there that could teach me more. Was that kind of where it came from?
Yeah, I'll hit the founding story of the technology play we wanted to make was, Khalil was an amateur boxer. He came from, I believe grew up in Quebec City, and then when he moved to Toronto to study in university, he started to go to a boxing gym a little late in his life to obviously compete very intensely as a professional, but he still wanted to be a very good amateur. So he started to train under a few different really good trainers, and always came from that data-driven background and wanted to see, how do I actually improve? What is out there to track and let me know if I'm getting better at boxing? Nothing was there back in the day. And so he was studying actually the tiny sensors and trackers, MEMS, micro electromechanical sensors, back in University of Toronto.
So he's no dumb boxer. Is he an engineer by trade or something?
Yeah, he's a mechanical engineer. His master's in mechanical engineering, studying the tiny sensors like accelerometers and gyroscopes. So that perfect mixture of, hey, I want to get better at boxing. I want to try to figure out, how do I get this view of how am I getting better over time? And so what they did is he took that knowledge in MEMS and said, well, nothing exists right now. It's basically like, this is the Fitbit era. It's the very beginning of people doing, fitness tracking with pedometry and just counting steps was simple. You couldn't count punches. You couldn't get anything in that realm. Didn't exist yet too. Yeah, specialized trackers needed. So yeah, that was the first idea came from him asking his trainers, how do I know if I'm getting better? And back then it was you spar against someone who you think is better and you see if you can beat them eventually. Mm-hmm. But you can't get an objective measure. And so everything was relative. So he figured, let's try and build something. And actually that's when we ran into each other, was sometime around then they started to build. We tried a punching bag with sensors in it to get a measurement. And then we wanted to really, in the very early days, figure out how do we get it on people in the actual situation? So in sparring, right? Any moment. So that's why we decided to put it on the wrist. So initially it was a bag, you can go hit the bag, but still it doesn't simulate how good are you technically in the ring, all these things. So the first really was solving our own pain. Was that pain of when I'm sparring, on the bag, shadowboxing, wherever, can I get a measure of what I'm doing, and am I getting better?
Oh, wow. So what was the first, you said we've pivoted several times. Was the first vision the bag? We're going to put sensors on a bag. Was that the first?
Yeah, I think the first test was, I think it was even a coin-operated bag. So I believe you could go up, and we wanted to measure if people would pay to get feedback. And so I think it was you put in change, and then it would basically be like, oh, hit this bag, almost like in the bars, the like punching bag. So like test your strength thing. And then obviously no one used it, no marketing value of it. It's like, okay, that doesn't really work. And then we decided to kind of build really MVP version of how do we build something that's valuable. So a lot of the stuff we talk about is like, how do you prove the need for this, right? Outside of your own personal need.
Yeah.
And so in the early days, we didn't want to build this complicated technology to start, right? The big problem that happens is people like, if I build this thing like the bag, the first mistake was we built the whole thing out and then we put it out in the world and we realized no one wanted it.
What do they call that? Minimum value?
Yeah, minimum viable product.
Viable product, right?
The
Let's spend the least amount,
Yeah.
not a ton of features on it and see what works. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And so following that MVP principle, one of the things that you run into is you start to see, okay, before even building anything real, you can get a good sense. So MVP, a lot of people think it's like, has to be an actual product that works. Mm-hmm. Like we didn't build an app, we didn't do anything. We literally went into studios, into boxing gyms, and we said, we're going to put this thing on your wrist, tracker. It was a piece of plastic, no electronics in it. It was literally just a piece of plastic. We put it on their wrist, and we said, this is going to tell you all these stats. And then we filmed the workout, the session, and then we went in and manually counted everything. And then we gave that as a first feedback, and we said, hey, here's the printout after an hour of us physically tagging the video. Here's the printout. You threw this many of this punch, this many of this. And we said, is this valuable? And then we just got that feedback. We didn't need to build the tech. We didn't need to do any of that. We just really wanted to get out what would be the final experience they would get. If we simulate it, would they want to pay for it? So even before building it, just try to get something out there that actually tests the market and says, are people going to say, yes, I'm going to pay for it? And I think one of the best analogies, it was smart. Michael Seibel, was you want to find a problem you're solving that's so immediate. It's like if someone's head's on fire, if you give them a brick, they're going to try to put it out with the brick. So like, even if it's clunky, doesn't really work that well, like you're solving a big enough need that no matter what you build in the early days, people are going to want to get it. And so the early adopters come and all that. So yeah, following that framework helps you not fall into the problem of build, spend all the time building, put it in the market like our boxing bag, no one uses it. And you go, wow, just wasted a year.
Yeah.
Right? So.
That's so smart because also you're not tying up money. So a cash in a startup is very valuable. I'm guessing the first round of funding was probably friends and family?
Yep. Small friends and family rounds. I think we even took out a few loans just to keep it going. We kept everything very lean in the early days. I think we were at a co-working space in Montreal that you could rent a floating table for like $50 a month. Like nothing. We kept our rent super low. Everyone lived together. It was definitely like cut costs just to see what works. And actually, I did it right out of university. So while I was in university, still taking courses, I was working on this. So that also, you go to events in your university, you get a lot of free pizza, a lot of free food. I remember going to a lot of those to supplement and make sure I wasn't spending too much.
Well, and talk about the team too, because we talked before, there's many co-founders. So did each of you're a marketing guy, obviously.
No.
Oh, you're not?
Believe it or not, yeah.
Did you guys have specific specialties when Khalil kind of looked around what the team should look like? Or how did he pick co-founders?
Yeah, I think, so it's very interesting how everything came together. So first of all, I have a background in mechanical engineering.
Oh, wow.
Right, similar to Khalil, he got a master's in it. I actually did not graduate. I left to do this, went to Y Combinator in winter 2016. So sorry to my university for leaving a little early there. And to my parents as well. They were not a huge fan of that one. But yeah, basically, like the way I saw it in the early days was, it was not necessarily figuring out who has the current skills to do it, but who's driven enough to solve these tough problems. So, obviously we had Khalil, who did have a master's in mechanical engineering, and from all like looking on the outside, should probably do the mech eng of it. Mm-hmm. I ended up coming and doing some of the mech eng for it, just to figure out, okay, we need to make a physical good, 3D print, learning all these things were a little bit my skill set, but everyone grew into other skill sets. Like we had, I would say, a really wide mix of very good technical people who started out technical and worked a lot more on other parts of the business, like business intelligence. We took a person who was really into electrical engineering, which is like the physical hardware components, turned into a software engineer, built our Android app. So that's Turbo, one of the co-founders, literally went from building physical like chip or like things with like physical hardware on it, to I'm going to build a whole Android app. I'm going to learn how to do that, all within that range.
Wow.
Yeah, we had Alex, who also developed our iOS app and did a lot of the hardware, firmware, everything that's like part of the business. He knew only a small part starting, and we made a lot of mistakes along the way. Decided to invest in ourselves a lot, which is a big one. So we, instead of outsourcing things and being like, well, we could spend like $100,000 and a firm can build our app, we said, what if we spent 8 weeks of someone just learning how to do it? Nothing comes out of that. It's 8 weeks of work that has no output other than this person knows how to do something better. And so we did a lot of that in the early days where we're like, A, we don't have the money to outsource this. And we do have a bit of time, not a lot, but we have enough to figure it out, because even onboarding an agency to build an app is still a lot of time to find the right person, onboard them, get them your vision. You could probably, it's like the classic analogy, what takes 2 engineers a week takes 1 engineer 3 days. It's like, because all this back and forth adds up and causes all the context switching. So like, why don't we just become experts in the things that we need to be experts in? So it goes back to the whole, like, you plan out your business model, you go, what do we need to be amazing at, right? We never necessarily in the early days need to be amazing at logistics, so we can outsource that. But your app, you're gonna make changes on a weekly basis. If you've outsourced it, you gotta keep paying somebody who doesn't care as much about the company.
And you have to wait, there's gonna be a lead time too.
Lead time, and then you don't even know the feedback because you're not building it in to it. So like, you can't necessarily connect them to your customer and say, you talk to our customer and figure out what needs to be built next. So owning those parts, even the manufacturing, all those things we decided to own, none of us had skills in that. We were all fairly new to running businesses, starting businesses. I mean, we had a journalist, a mech eng, we have, although I will say Tommy, probably the most experienced business-wise, went to Babson for entrepreneurship. And had 134, 136 amateur fights.
Oh wow!
So
okay, that's a good combination.
Yeah, very big. Like, very rare to find someone in the entrepreneur space who also has insane boxing experience. I think he was the #1 ranked in the U.S. For a little bit there, and just missed the Olympic trials by a hair. And so that's also part of the story too. Is like, that's why he wanted to join a technology company that was improving the stats in boxing. Was because everything is based on judges.
100%.
Right, and so that ends up being a bit of a problem. And so we wanted to solve that. As well. So really diverse group. I mean, entrepreneurship with Tommy, we have mech eng with Khalil, mech eng with me, CTO, just hardware components, and then they turned into software as well. And even for me, I studied, just building things mechanically. I ended up doing a lot more software. So I learned machine learning, I learned a bit of firmware to help them. Anytime we ran into a problem, it was pretty much who can learn how to solve it. So that's, I think, the biggest piece of how do you find the right people. They're driven enough to be able to solve the problems that you're going to run into, and they're able to learn and adapt, right? You can't have people who are like, this is the only hat I wear.
Yeah, you got to be flexible.
Got to do everything. Any new thing comes up, we want to open up this division of the business, you should learn how to do it yourself first, because how are you going to know how to hire the right person if you can't get it to work, at least to a small degree? So that's a lot of the stuff that I see is like, when you start that team, like we definitely were a big founding team, like 6 people, but comparison, Peloton's 5 founders.
Oh, okay.
Don't often talk about that. They're like, they were also 5 in the beginning. We were 6, been together for 6 years, and we've adjusted. Like, I was the chief data scientist and the CMO, and just moved around roles based on what was needed. I did some of the manufacturing. So yeah, so flexibility.
Well, that's the beauty of working at a startup, because I have a corporate background until recently. And what I see all the time, it drives me crazy. So there's somebody on the finance side of the business, or they're on manufacturing, whatever they are. So the manufacturing guy gets his master's degree, which the point of a MBA is to show you the total business. So if you're a controller, now you know how marketing works. Now you know how finance works, or whatever. They never switch, right? So now they have their MBA and they're still in manufacturing. They're never going to go to marketing. You're pigeonholed. It doesn't matter how many degrees you have. You're an engineer. You're an engineer. You're not a marketing person. So is that the beauty of working in a startup, that, hey, I was an engineer and I kind of went to marketing, which never happens in the real world. That never happens. It's a totally different skill set.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many people I meet that are really good marketers or even CMOs that their background is non-traditional to marketing. So like, some of my favorite, because it is a weird thing. Once you get into a certain level of solving problems, you can use the frameworks from other areas to solve them, right? Like, I don't need to be an expert at copy to be able to figure out let's test a bunch of different ways of saying something, see what works. So I'm taking the engineering testing frameworks, scientific method of just being like, how do we know what's objectively better than one thing or the other? I might not be the best at getting the first few lines written because I don't have a background in it, but eventually you'll start to figure out, okay, well, it's more important if we mention these things versus those. So just coming at it from that pure analytical scientific method, you can run any part of a business as long as you put enough time to understand really what you're working on in that silo. So I did spend a lot of time, like I said, we invest in how do we actually learn how to do this. So I ran our Facebook ads. So I went from like building algorithms inside of a sensor, and I'm like, okay, we need to solve growth now. We need to figure out how to spend money on ads because we just got our funding from Y Combinator, and it's like, okay, we need to somehow turn that into more velocity, right? If we just turn this into building more things, that doesn't work. You have to find a way to find more people. And so it was just a problem at the time. It was, okay, now that we have a bit of money, let's figure out how to deploy it accurately. So the first thing is like, let's run some ads. So I made some ads. I literally edited videos back in the day. We obviously had someone film them much better than me, but I would like get some software. I think it was like Lumen 5 back in the day or something. You just cut together moving picture images with videos. You throw it on Facebook. Does it work? Doesn't it? Compare it against other ad creative you're running and see how you can scale it up. So a lot of that stuff resonated well with me. Even though I had no background in marketing, it was like, okay, you have to figure out how do you actually sell something to someone, and you break it down into steps. So it's like decomposing a very complex problem to a bunch of stages you can change. So you're like, website experience, don't think about that until you've at least figured out, can I get people to my website?
What's the first thing in marketing? Brand awareness, like this is who we are, or what's the first step?
Yeah, I mean, we made a lot of mistakes in the early days for sure. So we over-invested in certain areas and under-invested in others, but depending where you are and what's available, like we were lucky, Facebook was a very high-performing, like easy entry point version back then. A few things have changed since then. iOS 14.5 made it harder to target and start smaller budget, but back in the day, very easy to just test. And so the first thing we did is really direct response. Can you get someone very quickly to know about you and buy you within a short period of time? So there was no like group we had to make aware and then group we had to like retarget and then convert. The very beginning was just, can I find those early adopters who, just like the analogy of the brick on the head, is that anything I show them, if it at least roughly solves a problem they're having, they're gonna jump at it right away. So that's why you lean into your early adopters, is you're like, if I show an ad to you and you can buy that day, we did have the people buying like immediately, a several $100 product, super niche boxing tracking. Early days, it was professional fighters, amateur fighters, and their coaches, the Olympic teams. Those were the customers. So if we
is that a big enough market or no?
Oh, no, definitely not. Yeah. I mean, that's why we pivoted.
There's only so many
times.
pros, right?
Yeah, so we got really good penetration there. And that was kind of the first entry point of like, okay, we can find them. There's not a lot of them, but either through direct marketing, through like paid media channels, you can find those people that will convert right away. We always focused on that because it's the most attributable sales, right? So like, this is something I work on a lot too, which is probably this great fusion of marketing and engineering, is how do you know with what you're doing is working? Yeah. You have to find out how to attribute the effort to a result. Okay. So it's kind of like a black box problem. You're like, I put this amount of money, I got this amount of things at the end. What actually happened in the middle? Was the money I spent on Facebook more effective than I spent on Google? Vice versa, so you want to know where to invest more. And finding those early customers, yeah, it's really that feedback loop of speaking to them, figuring out who you're bringing in, are they the right audience, and then adjusting. Nowadays, it's a little more broad. You kind of have to like fish into the big sea and see if you can find those early people. But you don't even just start with spending money. We spent money in the early days because we had it and we needed to turn it into growth. There is an expectation when you raise, of course, you have to turn it into velocity, and that's oftentimes goes into marketing and stuff like that. So one of the ways you can think about it is, referral is going to be a big one in those communities early on.
Boxers talk and, hey, check out this new...
Exactly. So you want to work on that and figure out, okay, how do we get the people who love us, who are those early adopters, who are willing to take on a product that's not really fully fleshed out yet, that's really like, it's, has its flaws. They were handmade, by the way. We've handmade the first 1,000
How long
units.
did it take to make a sensor?
So
how many hours?
So I had a 3D printer going that would print a mold that you would injection mold on top of. So basically, we had Alex working on building a board that would be a little chip with a battery attached to it. You give it to me, I'd put it in this little mold, I'd mix up silicon.
This is the assembly line.
This is the assembly line, and I'd put it in. I think it takes an hour for the silicon to cure. And back then we were selling, each set was, I think it was four sensors per, because it was for a gym that wanted 2 people to spar against each other.
Oh, okay.
So one pair for each person. And I would 3D print the base that it was holding on, like the charging station. And the limiting factor was actually how many charging stations we could print with a 3D printer. And like biggest investment back in the day was that 3D printer. It was just $1,000, but it saved us so much time, got us so much more product out there just to test and see. Like these things would break. Like we knew they were gonna break. So we're like, just let us know, we'll ship you another one. Like we're 3D printing them. They're not held together perfectly. Something's gonna break. Let us know, but at least you can try it. Give us feedback on how you're feeling about it, and basically just say things like, "This is very valuable." We even sold them, right? Like handmade, straight out of the garage.
How much were you selling them for at the time?
I think we sold a few for like $1,000.
How do you even pick a price point?
That is
it just out of the sky?
Yeah, a little bit. In the early, we do a lot of price testing now, and a little bit in the
but
middle.
Not then.
Oh, you just want to see, like, you can tell two different people. You can say, "What do you think it's worth?" Maybe they'll like you're giving them the first access to a new technology.
What's the goal at that point for the startup founders or the aspiring entrepreneurs? There's a nugget there. Yeah. So what is it when you're early on? You've shoestringed the product. You're making it in your mom's basement. Now what?
Yeah, I think it comes from like first you got to figure out is there a market there? Have you proven there's a market to start? So that MVP level stuff. Once you've gone through that and you've gone, okay.
Well, time out. Did you have, they call it an avatar in the YouTube world, right? Yeah. Who is the person you want watching this right now? This is my target demographic, marketers will say. Yeah, did you have that at the time? Was it, we're going to go after professional fighters first and that they're going to be the early adopters and those are the one who's going to promote it through word of mouth? Or was it even that well thought out?
Yeah, I mean, so we were very open to change and figuring out where it worked. The first group we went after, which we had initial success with, is like we literally just talked to the Canadian Olympic team, and they were basically like, "Yeah, we're down to do it." They actually funded us a little bit, gave us a few $1,000 grant, just be like, develop it and get it to our fighters. We started talking to the U.S. Olympic teams, but it really was people high level tracking. Like this is people who coach people that spar, people that are competitive. That's what we wanted to get into, and we just started with that one, but we kept our mind open to who would buy this. So there definitely was, day one we sold internationally when we actually manufactured it, like real manufacturing. This is the pre-US only, let's see how many people we can get it out to. Yeah, a lot of it was word of mouth in those days of the avatar in that sense was professional, amateur fighters and their trainers and coaches. So figuring out what's the right messaging for them. In the early days, it really was, and this is what I think a lot of people can take from this as early founders, is being new is a unique advantage in a lot of ways.
Why?
You're a new technology, so like you might not have good technology, but like you're the first one to potentially have it. So we had tons of people organically reach out because everyone was talking in the community of boxing of like, we've seen this new way to track something. It's very similar like how I think Clubhouse, obviously in the early days, all these things.
During the pandemic, it's like, you got to check this out.
Yeah,
you're sitting home all day.
It's all these early adopters of new technology who go, oh, this is a cool new thing. Even if it doesn't work super well or it's got problems with it, it's solving a problem or a solution to a problem that doesn't necessarily have a solution yet. So lean into that newness. People are much more willing, to deal with problems with your product. Don't think that it needs to be perfect when you launch it. Very much not so. Like we handmade these. We knew they were going to break. We told people. These will probably break after a few months. Let us know, we'll ship you another one. So like be very forgiving to those early customers because they're huge in terms of the adoption within the community. They're gonna be your biggest evangelists. And actually over time, you get less of them. So in the early days, you have this superpower.
Is that because there's only so many of those?
Yeah, like technology early adopters is kind of a group of people that with your industry only exists a certain number of them, right? And so there's gonna be like, for us, it was trainers who were like, I'm serious about data collection on my athletes. I wanna make them better, faster. There's only a handful, thousands of trainers who are that data driven working with high level athletes. So once you burn through that group, you're now trying to sell to less data driven people or people who are less sold on the idea. You have to convince and educate. Same thing in most markets. That early adopter in the beginning is willing to put up with so much more because they like the idea that they're in the beginning, right? They're in the early stages of it. So
they'll grow with you.
Yeah, they even feel like a sense of...
They're a part of it.
Yeah, like support for you. And we've literally, people are saying like, we invested in you is like a word they say because in the very beginning when it was mediocre looking as a product, not well marketed, like we're just like, here's a new tech. What are you going to do with it? We didn't have classes. We didn't have any way for them to interact other than put them on, measure.
When did we talked about the hardware. Let's talk about the software for a sec. When did it become, we're not just going to be counting punches and telling you how many hooks you threw, to we're going to hire trainers and we're going to give real people workouts, so we've got to develop an app. When did that happen?
Yeah, so great timeline too is we just shipped all these units, just the tracker that measures punches. Very simple. It was for a pro boxing, amateur boxing trainers kind of audience, and they started to use it with their fitness clients. And they started to ask, the coaches were like, you think of a typical boxing gym, it's like 1 or 2 really high ranking good fighters, and then
weekend
98%,
warriors.
or people who come in who just want to hit the bag and get it in a good workout. So they started using the trackers with them, seeing good results. They'd like put them on, and they'd be like, oh, after your session, here's how many punches you threw. And they'd be like, oh, that's
people
really cool.
love that,
And they'd be like,
cool.
oh, I feel like I'm progressing. And so then they started to ask for fitness features in the community. So we actually built a Facebook community for the exact reason of talk to the customer, get to know what they're doing. So even that niche audience of people who were just trainers of high-level athletes or medium-level athletes would give us feedback all the time. And a lot of it started to come out as be fitness related. So then we sat down and said, well, what do we want to build? What's like the next evolution? Because you hit a cap at a certain point. We're a hardware-only business, which means growth every month. And I think we'll talk about this too, the subscription model being so much better.
I love the subscription model.
Growth every month comes at you selling exactly what you did the month before again and more. Right? So it's super hard to grow that type of business.
And you don't want to be a manufacturing company.
Yeah, exactly. That's not the thing.
You want to be a tech company.
Yeah, exactly. So in the early days, we figured, okay, at a certain point, we sat down and we said, well, what do we need to change to become the business we want to be? And this is in the early days, actually. I think Peloton was just entering the conversations back in the day, and we kind of saw a few things happening. We actually built basically like how to overlay stats in live fights. We're like, maybe the betting community, maybe fight fans would appreciate. And actually PFL went on to do something similar where they like now have live stats in fights. Talked to them early on. It was an interesting angle, but when you do the back of the envelope, you're like, not necessarily a tech company, not a high growth, not what we necessarily want. We also did Orange Theory for boxing as an experiment where everyone in the class would put on trackers, the gym would pay a monthly fee, and then everyone can see their stats on a screen, and kind of very similar to that Orange Theory vibe. Tried it out, realized, not a huge amount of growth opportunity because you're still selling to every single franchise gym. It's not just a contract and boom, everyone adopts you. You get one headquarters and then you have to sell to like 1,000 locations, which doesn't feel like a big business for us either, or something we really wanted to work on. And then someone brought up the idea, it's like, hey, what if we just own the whole experience? What if we make boxing as accessible as possible? We just open up, we want to get you the best gear, best trainers, we want to get you the ability to track it, feel community by being able to see yourself against the leaderboard, speak to others. Very similar to what they were doing in the early days there. And the big difference is we have to do a lot of the training and education part.
Everyone knows how to pedal a bike.
Yeah, right? It's push harder.
Go faster.
With boxing, it's like you have to build this really good content. It's very similar to like the belt system in any martial arts gym. It's like
100%.
You're going to get rewarded as you learn more and more. You felt it probably over the 12 years, the progression, learning new things, adding more footwork, and that keeps you around longer too. So that was kind of the view we had in the early days. Like, well, this can really work if we get it in people's homes and we get the experience right. And
now you got a large potential market.
Potentially, yeah. And we don't know this at this moment because we don't know how many people would want to box at home. What are the restrictions that people run into? How do we actually build this business? So we did the same thing. We did an MVP. We put out a website that had photos that were mostly photoshopped. That was basically like sign up for our email list or sign up for this thing. And we wanted to gauge demand. So we just get people to give us their emails and then we'd call them. And I'd be like, hey, what are your needs? Like, what excited you about
How did you get them to sign up? What was the hook? What did they get?
I think it was like we were basically saying this is about to exist. At-home boxing with a trainer, with a bag, gloves, trackers, interactivity. And it was very poorly done. I did some of the Photoshop, so I can admit that it was an ugly website. But that's the early adopter thing is the people will deal with the ugly website because you're solving something that you're the first one to solve for them. No other at-home boxing company existed then. There was Billy Blank's tapes, but nothing was connected that give you the right equipment to actually learn boxing.
And that wasn't a real boxing.
Yeah, it was follow along. It was
they're
like,
not going to show you head movement, footwork.
Exactly. So it wasn't the authentic boxing experience we thought the world would want and need. And so we went from there and we basically said, okay, let's get these emails. And I think the hook was like, sign up to be the first to know. Nothing crazy. And conversion rate wasn't great. I think it cost us $10 to get an email, which is expensive.
So you better get your money's worth.
Yeah, so every single person, and in the early days, you make all these choices. You're like, okay, well, I'm going to get their emails, and I'm going to email them right away, and I'm going to make it as personal as possible. I'm going to say, like, it's literally me. I'm like, hey.
You're drafting these emails.
Yeah. I'm like, hi, this is Patrick. I still do this to this day, is I will say, hi, I'm Patrick. Like, I'll write the email to the user, and I'll say, I want to get your feedback. Sometimes I make it generic enough, but it's still from me, from my email address. When they reply, it goes right back to me. And I say, hey, like, I'd love to get your feedback on this. Can we either hop on a call, or can you write me a quick blurb about your thoughts? And that's helped me so much. Anytime we do new changes, I'm always trying to figure out, okay, can I talk to people who might be on the edge of buying and figure out what their hesitations are? The first pulse test is, can I actually talk to them real quick? And then you can come up with a survey and get more like percentage scale data. Like how many people actually have this out of 100? issue. But the first one is just see what people are saying, because that gives you where to dig, right? It's a pulse test of you going, okay, this person is saying they really want this because their gym just closed near them. Or they really want this because they're building out a gym and they've always done boxing and they love it. So you start to understand, okay, who is this I'm talking to? On top of that, you can dig in and see how many people have the similar issues that then become your unique value props, where you're like, oh, okay, everyone is saying that they were attracted because of this value prop to them. Dig in more and more to that one.
It sounds like what you guys did really well is building community. And whether it's a YouTube channel like this or a podcast or, a business, building community is so huge. And like you said, getting those early adopters and making people feel part of it. Why do you think you were so successful at it? Just out of need, or was it thought out?
Yeah, I mean, the early thing is we really had it drilled in us doing these early programs, even YC and all these companies, is like, speak to the customer. Just keep talking to them. And the one ways you can do it is, even if you're like a B2B SaaS company that you don't really have a social product per se. There's some really cool positioning things you can do. You can say, do you want to join our VIP group of customers that we're going to talk to on a monthly basis or quarterly basis where we run things by you? Now you feel like you're not doing this socially, like I'm using some SaaS, Frame.io to do my editing software. I don't need to be part of the Frame.io community. There's no real social value, but there is a value in me feeling like the company listens to me. So that's another way you can play off of those early adopters, say I'm going to listen to you. That's a new value that you don't get from an enterprise company, because you might also be a small business or whatever, but I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to put you on this VIP kind of list of customers that are open to give me constant feedback. Get the buy-in from them, and now you have a small group of people who are part of a community that's giving you direct feedback all the time.
That is so great, and that applies to really any business.
Yeah,
I do the same thing with the show, right? Who would you like to see me interview? What did you like about this? What didn't you like about this? I've got an email list just like a startup would, and that is so important, and that translates to any business.
Oh yeah. We see it work wonders, and that talking to the customer piece it really makes you confront your biases a lot as well, which helps, right? You might be building something in a direction, or the company might even have its blinders on a little bit and be saying things like, we are going to build this. And then at every step of the way, make sure you're having that gut check of, well, does the customer want that? What's the unique insight? And everyone's going to bring up that classic Ford quote of, if I asked them what they wanted, they would say a faster horse. There is some things you need to take a big leap, but at the same time, the reason why you can take that leap is you understood the why behind that. Right? Keep asking those whys. So in the Ford example, it's if I asked what they wanted, they'd say a faster horse. You can say, well, they wanted a faster means of travel. The real why behind that is they want to get from point A to B faster.
Talk about the app now. Promote it a little bit. We've talked about kind of how it evolved. Yeah. What is it now, and why is it so great? Yeah. I said why I think it's great. What do you think so great about it?
Yeah, I think so. The final pivot we did, as I mentioned, was really figuring out, okay, we want to own the whole experience. And so when we went through that initial exercise, we hadn't built anything at that moment. We're okay, so we need to solve a lot of problems that exist right now with doing boxing at home, right? Biggest one is the bags aren't good enough quality. You might have a hanging bag. Very few people can actually install hanging bags in their house.
I had to pay somebody to hang mine.
Yeah, exactly. So either you have a lot of experience in boxing and you're willing to make this investment to drill something into your roof. Yeah. So we were okay, we need to make it accessible. So we chose, first thing was what's the best bag we can get people that's freestanding, doesn't need to be drilled into your roof. So we came up with a few bag innovations that gives you a bag that's actually, we've had Mike Tyson punch it.
Who's also an investor.
Who's also an investor,
Which is crazy.
And we've had him punch as hard as he can and tried to measure this. We've built it in such a way that it doesn't walk away from you, keeps getting reset into the same spot. So you can actually do a workout without running after your bag, which was already a huge frustration. People would be in their home gym, the thing would bounce away and they'd have to every few minutes come back.
And a lot of people don't know when to hit a heavy bag. When it's swinging, you don't want to hit it when it's swinging away from you. It sounds weird, but you want to hit it when it's coming towards you. But you may get knocked around by the bag to figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of problems with okay, how do we get people who don't have this knowledge base of how to get a good bag in your house? We want to remove that from the equation. We want to go, we're going to give you the best bag. Okay. We're going to give you really good gloves. We're going to give you wraps, quick wraps, so you don't have to worry about knowing how to wrap your hands like crazy with just one little piece of fabric around your wrist with a nice knuckle protection. Nice. And then that's the first part. This is before you even do a workout. We started by basically looking at what are the biggest user experience problems that we need to solve to get a good experience, right? If someone doesn't even have a bag or doesn't even have wraps or gloves, doesn't matter the app you built to start, right? If they're not going to follow it because they can't do the thing.
They have nothing to hit.
Yeah, exactly.
Who wants to shadow box all day?
Yeah, so we started with that fundamental, let's solve these things. So we went bag, gloves, wraps, And then we even sold flooring as well to make sure that, you're on slippery flooring. When you throw punches, you're a lot of hip motion, a lot of leg motion.
Yep.
If you're on slippery floors, you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to fall.
Sure.
It's going to be not fun because you can't generate as much power if your feet are flying everywhere. So we did that one, and then we came to the app part, and it's like, okay, what do we really, this is all like theoretical at the time. We're just mapping out, like, what do we need to solve? And the app one is like, okay, we need to find really good trainers. Because we have this unique advantage where we're not geo-located, so we don't have to lock ourselves into a geo. You're not going to a specific gym that you can only hire a few people from the area, and every time you show up, you can get the best people. Yeah. And so through our previous product, Hixa, we reached out to a lot of them. We already had, Hixa was the punch tracker.
Oh, okay.
It's still the name of the company. We just changed it to FightCamp, which is a much nicer name. And so from the early days, it was like, okay, we have this network now of professional, high-level fighters, all with legit fight experience, used our product or heard about us through our other business. Let's bring the best ones in. So we literally just met with them, decided on a core group to start with, grew it a little bit, added 1 or 2 trainers here or there, and then that ended up being, okay, now we can actually lock in really good personalities, really good knowledge base, really authentic boxing and kickboxing experience. That's one thing that we don't touch on as much, but we also have, champion kickboxers.
Yeah.
We do a lot of kickboxing, boxing, and we do everything around it too. Everything the fighter touches, we aim to have a workout that covers it. You might have seen it in the app. We have like ab workouts, conditioning, dynamic stretching, and then you can get into the boxing, kickboxing workouts.
And then
well.
like the real in the weeds kind of, this is head movement, and this is how you slip
defensive,
and duck, and foot movement, which is so important too. And stuff you're not going to get anywhere else.
Yeah, one size fits all classes are going to give you, here are the 6 basic punches, here's the same combo we're going to do for the next
over and over
5
for the rest
years.
of your life.
Exactly. Until you're like, hey, this is boring, I'm not learning anymore.
Yeah, you're not progressing.
And then the last piece, which was that connected piece, is like right at that point, we would be a regular business. We'd be like, oh, we're like, the potential Taibos of the world or something, where it's like, we have a trainer, a video, and you can do the workout in your house.
Yep.
And then the last part is, okay, how do we make this an interactive, really fun experience for people? And that's where our trackers came in of like, okay, we found this issue where we worked with a few people to try to figure out what makes a lot of sense in this field or what makes a really good workout, and disjointing the tracking and the class. Like if you just track over a regular class, it's not as effective as if the trainer is literally calling out things for you in the class. Like you're going to do 100 punches this round at least, right? And they're giving you goals and things like that you can measure against. That's the most impactful thing. So we started to build all our content, keeping all this in mind, that they're going to have trackers on them. You can give them specific feedback on what you expect of them. And so we started to build that into the app experience. Your punch count now, every round, you have an expectation of punches you have to hit. And if you go over, it's bonus, tracking your speed. So all these things are designed to basically like add gaming and gamified components on top of it, as well as something you can talk about with other people, right? If you go to a gym and you see how hard the person beside you is working, you'll bond afterwards, be like, man, that really good job, you worked really hard there. If you see someone else's score, you can now say, oh, we worked the similar amount. And now in the community, you can be like, I just beat myself because I have a score now. I just beat this person. And you can start talking in a way that basically says like, we're both working really hard, and this is really cool that we can share it.
It's so true. And because at a boxing gym, if I'm tired and I'm kind of slacking on the heavy bag, if somebody walks in next to me and is killing it, it's super fast and punching hard, now I'm going to go an extra round and try to step it up. And it's so cool you kind of captured that and brought it to a virtual world, because that is important. It's motivating.
Yeah, and one of the big things we found as well is like, think of it almost like it's you're looking at like the future you is going to look back on this. You're going to have a physical memory in data of what you did in this workout, and when you're going to look back, you don't want to disappoint yourself. You're basically, it's a lot of you versus you, where you go, like if you just watch a video on your TV, you could not do it. You could do a little bit of it. You could do all of it. This one is, you're going to see the rounds you did not punch.
Yeah, no one's watching on the YouTube video.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
no one's counting anything.
Yeah, exactly. So in this one, you're literally going to have a record of how hard you went in that workout, that you want to best a previous one, you want to best another person. Yeah. And yeah, that motivation of literally the best one we have is you can fight like the average, the FightCamp average.
Okay.
Which to me is a good one, because it's like you're not necessarily fighting an individual, but you're like, everyone wants to be above average.
Of course.
So you're going to see this score, and it's pretty aggressive. We have a pretty like strong community. So like you're going to push yourself harder in every round. And this is something unique to boxing, is when you do a spinning class, you're following a cadence. The teacher tells you how hard to go each time. With boxing, the goal is as hard as you can, as frequently as you can, like punch hard, punch often, tight defense, good movement. All of these things are at your pace. So if you want to go harder, you go harder. The guy comes in beside you who's punching harder and faster, you go harder and faster. And so that's where you get that huge efficiency gain. Like that's what we see huge advantage. Like, I hope a lot of people in the world will get to experience what it's like.
You know, I'm sold. I did the free workouts. I did them the last 2 days. I went on YouTube. I do homework for these things. So I went on YouTube. I had to try it. I also downloaded the app. But I'm getting sensors, and I'm going to sign up for yet another subscription, right? Like, I need another subscription, like a hole in the head. But to me, it's worth, what is it, $40 a month?
Yep, 39.
Yeah, a trainer's 100 plus for one session.
Yep.
You know, now you have trainers, you know, as many different ones and times you want.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and if you want the gear, the other cool thing is we definitely offer a lot of financing. Like,
Oh,
one of the
cool.
big ones, like, you can get it over 36 months now. So, like, you want to pay for this thing divided over 36 months, it's like
that's great.
$40, $50 a month, basically.
Wow, that's great.
So that's all in the aim of accessibility. Like, we try to make it 0% APR, all those things. So it's like pretty much just choose this one. Don't worry about upfront costs. Very similar to like the analogy of finding the right partner when you're going through hardware manufacturing. It's like, we don't want to put this huge burden on you. Like, pay us over time. That makes the most sense.
No barrier to entry.
Yeah, we're trying to get that as low as possible. Hence, free YouTube videos, free app content. We just want more people to see it and experience it.
And you don't need a bag or anything. It's every boxer shadow box. So you can do these workouts and just hit air and you'll be winded, I'm telling you, after a round. And you should definitely check it out. So thank you for sitting down with me, man. This is a pleasure. We got to talk two of my favorite things, business and boxing. This was awesome.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.
Guys, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Every Tuesday at 10 a.m., I have interviews with the biggest entrepreneurs in the world, and you get inspiration from their story, but you also get real concrete tips on how to improve your business or start a business if you don't have one yet. So make sure you check it out. Thanks, guys.